Good morning. As Rocco mentioned, my name is Jason Jerald. I am the co-founder and principal consultant at Next Gen Interactions, and I'm here today to talk to you about specifically virtual reality interactions versus augmented reality interactions. Why am I here today? Well, I've spent about 20 years, and I estimate about 30,000 hours designing and building applications and virtual reality systems. And a lot of that has gone into interactions. And I've condensed that 30,000 hours into this book here called The VR Book, focusing on our perception, how do we perceive the real world so we can apply it to virtual reality, and how do we interact with virtual reality applications. For more information on that, you can check me out at thevrbook.net or follow me on Twitter with the handle TheVRBook. Okay, so let's get into it. I'll start with just the different types of devices. I looked at several different devices and I kind of categorized them into common device types. You can see I divided them into hand input and non-hand input. Why so many devices are focused on the hand? Well, the hands are the most important device that all of us humans have, right? A good portion of our brain controls our hand and also the sense of our hand. So it's very important. All these other hardware devices just allow us to use our hands within the virtual environment. And you can see on the check boxes there that there's no single hardware device that has advantages in every situation. It's very much content dependent. It really depends on what your project is, what you're trying to do, how you're trying to interact with the world. You can also combine some of these together to have sort of hybrid systems. For example, you could have eye tracking with a handheld controller. And so the different devices up on the top is a world fixed device. That's, for example, say a steering wheel in the environment, or location-based entertainment builds, these custom-built systems that are very unique to the experience. In the book, I have examples of maybe 100 or so interaction techniques. And what I did is I categorized those together into what I call interaction patterns, which are very different than design patterns, software design patterns. Interaction patterns are from the user's point of view. How do I interact with the world? So they're higher level than software design patterns. And I divide those into selection patterns. How do I reach out, or how do I point to something in the world? Manipulation patterns. How do I pick the object up or change the color and such? Viewpoint control patterns. Compound patterns, which combines different types, different ideas together, different patterns together. And indirect control patterns, which allow you to do more abstract concepts. The first thing everyone tries when they start building virtual reality systems is to grab a gun, right, and be able to point to someone with that gun. It's this very sort of primitive thing that actually can be quite engaging, and it turns out to be quite easy to do. And so that's the first I call the first technique, just because it's so common. Here I'm threatening the president of Digital Art Forums, Paul Malenic, by pointing the gun at him, right? It's very natural. I don't have to think about it, and he doesn't have to think about it either. As he sees that he's being pointed at, because his hands are tracked, he can just hold up his hands. He doesn't have to think about which button to press to surrender. So there's a very nice, it's not just about human-computer interaction, it's about human-human interaction through body language. And of course, you want to pick up objects and manipulate them in different ways. Here we worked with the National Institute of Health to help kids learn about how their brains work. So this is basically our first title we have here, where you pick up different brain parts and you snap a 3D brain puzzle together the same way that you would in the real world. So you're learning by doing. You can also pick up other types of tools, which this is what I call the Jigs technique, to be able to control things more precisely. So normally in virtual reality, precision modeling is impossible to do because you're not constrained to a 2D physical plane like you are with a mouse. Here we can add artificial virtual constraints, such as these jigs here, similar to how toolsmiths work in the real world. That way you can virtually have those constraints and snap grids onto faces of other objects and then change the scale of those grids and model that way. Here's an example of bringing in 2D metaphors into the virtual environment. If I want to do a quick calculation with a calculator, I don't want to step outside of the virtual environment. I want to be able to control that from within. So this is something I built where you can bring in arbitrary 2D desktop tools. Not the ideal case for a lot of situations because you want to make it the ideal fit for the virtual environment, but this is a general tool that allows you to easily do things. And I see I'm running out of time, so I will move more quickly to the end. This is a speed talk here. To wrap up, if you want to know if you're interested in VR interactions and different ways of interacting with virtual environments beyond just the obvious, you can check out the book at thevrbook.net. And also, if you're more interested in the augmented reality interactions, I'll be moderating the interactions panel at 2 o'clock this afternoon in the theater. So I hope to see you there. Oh, and if you come to that, I'll show you how you can win a free copy of this book that I'll mention at the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. We have time for some questions.
I just have an overarching question. Will the presentations that we're seeing today be available electronically?
Yes, all of the presentations that you see here throughout the entire show will be put on YouTube afterwards. And I believe PowerPoints will be made available for the presentations that we have those for. Questions for Jason?
I should say not just electronic form. If you want to see an early version of the book, I have the analog form here.
I was really impressed with the Jigs technique as far as being able to bring real-world tool metaphors into the virtual space. Have you found that there are jigs that don't necessarily map to real-world tools that are sort of specific to the virtual, that there's no other analog in the real world?
Yeah, so actually, I didn't get to this one, but there's something called a 3D multi-touch pattern, other patterns that as well that can be very abstract. The 3D multi-touch pattern doesn't really match the real world, similar to 2D multi-touch. If I want to scale into the world, basically I can put my hand around something similar to a pinch gesture on a 2D interface, and I can zoom into it like so, and also rotate at the same time. So if I put my hand around it, I can kind of zoom in and rotate it at the same time. I guess I can kind of do that with my head, but it's very different because you're either scaling the world or equivalently or inversely scaling yourself, which, it's just not going to happen in the real world. And so you can zoom in on the Jigs technique to get more precision by going to a different scale.
That's about all the time we have for questions, actually. Thank you very much, Jason.
Thank you.